This is the Officer Tatum Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Officer Tatum Show. I want to introduce my friend. He got you covered. Don't even worry. Carl Jackson.
All right, thank you, Officer Tatum, and welcome back to the Officer Tatum Show. The number to call in, 844-900-7243. 844-900-7243. Guys, I think you're going to love the next guest. We're going to be talking about the SVB collapse, what that means for you. We're going to be talking about digital currency, the threat of digital currency, and the threat of nationalizing our banks, because I'm not sure if you missed it, but that actually kind of happened this week. And the media doesn't seem to be tackling it from that angle. I think a lot of people are a little nervous and scared to do just that. But let me tell you something. I love you and I love America. And so I want to bring you the best information possible. I'm not going to tell you what type of financial decisions per se to make. But I will tell you some of the things to look out for, along with my guest, R.C. Williams. Welcome to the Officer Tatum Show.
Brother Carl Jackson, how are you, man? It's great to be on.
Thank you. And actually, take that back. I will tell you some things to do. First off, get your behinds out of debt and get yourselves out of some of these major banks. All right. And I'm hearing some advice to the contrary. Screw these big banks. Get yourself in a local regional bank. R.C. Williams has a website, SherlocExposes.com, SHERLOC exposes.com. When it comes to cryptocurrency, when it comes to banking, when it comes to, let me just be honest, RC, straight up nerd stuff, when it comes to the tech industry, RC is who I rely on. He is brilliant in regards to all of this stuff. And so I want to talk about it. But first, RC, I want you to listen to this audio clip. This is the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, RC. She says that our banking system is A-OK. Audio clip number 2, por favor, Sean.
The Federal Reserve is providing additional support to the banking system with a new lending facility. This will help financial institutions meet the needs of all of their depositors. I can reassure the members of the committee that our banking system is sound and that Americans can feel confident that their deposits will be there when they need them. This week's actions demonstrate our resolute commitment to ensure that our financial system remains strong and that depositors' savings remain safe.
Okay, RC, you heard the lady. Our banking system is sound. What say you?
Oh, sweet Jesus, help us. So, Carl, it's interesting timing. In today's Rip from the Headlines, we actually ran this story from Janet Yellen. So let me break down for everybody what Yellen is actually saying to you. She's saying that she's going to take enough of your money and help to support and prop up banks in an effort to keep you from running on the banks in a mass panic. I'm standing probably 35 to 40 feet away from Elise Stefanik, who's a member of Congress, and I was just talking to her about this at an event, and she understands the same thing that we all understand. That's a lie. Let's be honest. If the Fed didn't step in and do something, and the reason that they stepped in the first place last week is because they were looking at a complete banking collapse if they didn't say something. So for Janet Yellen to go in front of Congress and make a statement like that is absolutely asinine, and it's really scary, Carl.
Yeah, it is. These people will lie straight up to our faces. RC, if we could just review, just like we did, and I had RC on the podcast earlier this week, so check out the podcast, The Carl Jackson Show, on the Salem Podcast Network, wherever you go to get your podcast. Follow us on social media, The Carl Jackson Show, and we broke this down. RC broke this stuff down, but I want to revisit some of this stuff. RC, first off, let's talk about how we got to a point where this SVB bank, where, let's face it, a lot of Democrat donors, a lot of Democrat donors. All right, let's just put it that way. We got a buttload of cash that was infused into the system as interest rates were climbing. As the Jerome Powell was telling us that interest rates were going to climb, this SVB bank and their executives there didn't seem to understand that information. So they bought these long-term securities. They held them there. The securities were freaking collapsing, and they absolutely did nothing about it until it was too late. And then now you have this fear of contagion, this could be run on the banks. And it isn't my goal to panic people, but it is my goal to let you know, do not believe these liars in Washington, D.C. Where did I get it wrong, RC?
So, Carl, you're spot on. Let's take a look at the very basics of this. So the first thing you need to understand about Silicon Valley Bank is they broke one of the primary rules because they didn't think they needed to follow it. There was no head of compliance for Silicon Valley Bank for about 8 months. So, yes, Democrat donors, yes, crazy ESG and DEI investments and all of this stuff. Here's the facts. There was no head of compliance. The board didn't really know what they were doing. And so the bank made a ton of bad bets, and then they got called on it because here's what happens. Late Wednesday, early Thursday, Peter Thiel, legendary Silicon Valley investor and billionaire, started telling the companies in his investment portfolio to pull their money out of Silicon Valley Bank, right? So they started doing it, and that word spread. So what the media did is they said, well, Peter Thiel created a run on the banks. And our response was simple. No, bad economics created a run on Silicon Valley Bank and actually ripped the Band-Aid off of something that we've been talking about for months. If you honestly look at the banking system today, Carl, the majority of your major big banks are technically insolvent. I'll get to why in a second. But sticking to Silicon Valley Bank. So here you go, right? Peter Thiel says it. People start to move. Then we find out everything is upside down. Next thing you know, by Friday, they closed down the bank. So here's the deal. The Fed took it into receivership. That means they took control of it, right? They had a plan. The goal was to sell this dud to somebody before things went completely out of control. So they tried to sell it. They couldn't do that. Then they tried to put it up for auction. They couldn't do that. So about that time, it's early Sunday. They've lost an hour because of daylight savings time. They're like, if we don't get this dealt with by midnight tonight, come Monday morning, the entire banking system is going to implode, and there's going to be a massive run on the bank. It's going to crash the economy around the world, right? So here's what they did, Carl. They decided, talking about the Fed and the Treasury, they were going to create the Bank Term Funding Program, BTFP, which Yellen was talking about, right? So here's what they did. They made it up. They made it up, right? But here's what they did. They took money from the Exchange Stabilization Fund. That was created by the 1934 Gold Reserve Act, which, by the way, that was done when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt stole everybody's gold and made it illegal to own it. And then the next day repriced gold. The next day repriced gold and made a huge profit. All of a sudden, the United States had a cash cow. So what they did is the Fed said, listen, we're going to back every deposit because here's the challenge. The FDIC, as you know it today, that thing that guarantees your accounts up to $250,000, if everybody ran on the banks tomorrow, they would only have enough money to pay 1.38% of all the money out. The FDIC only has about $120 billion in its reserves, right? So think about this for a second. Go ahead.
No, I want people to pay attention to what you're about to say, because when you told me this, okay, let's just be honest. It's scary. It's scary. So pay attention what R.C. Williams, SherlocExposes.com, SHERLOC, exposes.com. He provides a lot of financial information, tech information, crypto. If you want to understand this stuff in layman's terms, R.C. Williams is who I go to, of SherlocExposes.com. Go ahead and continue, R.C.
So, Carl, here's the scary part. We just talked about the FDIC, right? These are the people that are supposed to insure your accounts to make sure if something goes wrong with the bank, you're made whole. Here's the problem. The FDIC only has about $125 billion in it. If we all ran to the bank tomorrow and demanded all of our money out, they'd only be able to pay out about 1.38%. So here's the challenge. The exposure for the FDIC with the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank was $21 billion or so. So here's what happened with one bank. 25% of the FDIC's money was gone. Imagine what would have happened if multiple banks had failed and they had to try to make good on them, remember that 1.38%? This country would have been turned upside down in an instant. So the Fed had to do something. And here's what they came up with. And by the way, just so everybody knows, these people have no idea what they're doing. I don't care what they tell you. I don't care how smart they are. I don't care how many degrees they have.
Exactly.
I'm a junior college guy and a broadcaster myself. I don't have an advanced degree. I can tell you this. These people make stuff up to keep you from panicking. So they made it up and said, look, we're just going to guarantee all the deposits.
Hey, RC, hold on. Hold.
At Sunbelt Rentals, tools rule. They also clean and cut, chip and chop, help you climb high and dig deep with the right size tools for your size jobs and the expertise to help you rent the perfect one in-store, online, or in-app. At Sunbelt Rentals, where tools rule.
Is the Officer Tatum Show. 844-900-7243. That's 844-900-7243.
All right, welcome back to the Officer Tatum Show. I want to talk to you about food for the poor. As we head into the weekend, let me remind you about Officer Tatum's campaign for the nonprofit Christian relief organization Food for the Poor. In their core mission to feed the poorest of the poor in our hemisphere, including 17 Latin American and Caribbean nations, spokesman Paul Jacobs is just back from seeing firsthand the plight of children and families in Guatemala and Honduras.
These are families in this post-pandemic era. There are moms and families who they lost their jobs through the pandemic, and those jobs haven't returned. There are many families who are saying the rising cost of food has gotten so untenable that they cannot even afford the basics. And so you stand in between these families right now with your gift.
All right, as Paul just told us, because hunger and malnutrition continue to run rampant in poor nations, I'm asking for your help once more. All you have to do is go to Brandon's website, theofficertatum.com. Click on the Give Food, Give Life banner at the top of the page. Just $72 provides 2 children with 2 meals a day for an entire year, or $144 gives the same blessing to 4 starving kids. More than 1 billion children are living in poverty. So the question is, how many children can you feed? You could be the answer to their prayers today. Please go right now to theofficertatum.com. Click on the Give Food, Give Life banner at the top of the page, or give them a call at 855-918-4673. That's 855-918-4673. And we thank you. Okay, back to my guest, R.C. Williams of SherlocExposes.com. And callers, if you want to call in, 844-900-7243. Jacob in Greenville, I see you there. Don't go anywhere with that question. I do want to deal with that because you are absolutely right on that particular issue. Okay, so we're talking about what we witnessed this week that no one seems to be talking about. We just witnessed the nationalizing of a bank. And people are not making a big deal about this, RC. RC, I want you to pick up where you left off. But also, the only person in the Senate that I've heard talk about this stuff with any level of substance has been Ted Cruz thus far. That is crazy.
It is crazy, Carl. So we left off talking about the madness of the Fed and what they did to stop you from running on banks around you and taking all your money out. I did want to point out one thing about the way that the Fed structured this program that they just created out of thin air, the Bank Term Funding Program. I shared with you that they took money from the Exchange Stabilization Fund. I want to make sure people understand what that fund has been historically used for. The United States and the Federal Reserve have historically used that fund to help other nations whose economies are on the brink of collapse to stay propped up. So ask yourself this question. If that's how the fund was used and they're using it for us now, what's happening? I said this Monday, Carl. I said, I don't think people quite appreciate how close we are to the precipice here of a banking implosion. And the Fed is doing everything they can to keep people from panicking while they're behind the curtain just trying to make up enough stuff so you don't freak out. This is a dangerous time, Carl. And the fact that Ted Cruz is the only one that made this statement is absolutely insane.
Okay, so let me share a headline or two with you, RC. Are you going to be able to stick with me through the bottom of the hour for a little bit?
I'm here as long as you want, Carl.
Okay, all right. So here's some. This bank was woke as all get out. Obviously, the executives cared much more about wokeness than they did their depositors. They spent, I think they gave, where is it? Had to have forgotten, man, $73 million. They donated to Black Lives Matter. $73 million. This is what these people were more concerned about. And it's fascinating to me that no one, even depositors, weren't like, what the heck are you guys doing? Was no one paying attention? What was happening there?
Carl, that's an accurate description. You know, when you let the patients run the asylum, this is what happens. And so there's so much money flowing, right? Because you're in the heart of Silicon Valley. I've worked for companies in the Silicon Valley that have used Silicon Valley Bank. It's been around forever, right? So when you get that drunk with power and you think that there's no end to it, you just kind of do whatever you want. And that's a symptom of a lot of banks. We'll get to that in a minute. But here's the thing with Silicon Valley Bank. They continue to make these bets. There's no oversight. Remember, they did not have a regulator for 8 months, Carl. That means the person that's supposed to keep them in line doesn't exist. And one person on the entire board had any banking experience. This is what happens. It's like when we give an example to people when we do research work, my wife and I, we do research work through Sherloc. We say, imagine that you were poor and all of a sudden you had $50 million. Well, you have no frame of reference on how to manage wealth. So what are you going to do? You're going to do all the things that your flesh calls you to do. You're just going to be a maniac. That's exactly what happened inside of Silicon Valley Bank.
Now, one of the things that I'm concerned about is, okay, so the FDIC is insured. People are insured up to $250,000. You've already informed us that there's only $125 billion cash on hand, if you will, that the FDIC has. $21 billion of that went to prop up SVB. Biden's donors, basically, people. Biden's donors. That's what I want you to understand. Would this have happened anywhere else? Would this have happened in Florida, RC, in your opinion? Would they have spent that money? And I want you to talk about the actual, to me, it looks like they're nationalizing the banking system. And this is what I want people to watch for and be concerned about, frankly.
So, Carl, it's a great question, and I'll say this to you and everybody else, that we saw a hint of what that answer would be in Yellen's testimony today. People should go back and look at it, and credit to Jim Lankford from Oklahoma and Mike Rappo from Arizona for asking Janet Yellen the tough question. So let me get this straight. You bailed out this big bank, so if the local credit union or local bank in my town goes under, are you going to support them too and guarantee all the deposits? And her answer was no. Carl, because her answer was no before. Janet Yellen is doing what she's told by power brokers who don't want to lose money. So credit to at least a couple of people in Congress questioning this woman and basically putting it out on Front Street for everybody to see. Let's just put it like this, Carl. If your bank goes under, that woman ain't coming to save you. Good luck.
And now we know, I mean, there isn't even – how much time do we have here, Sean? There isn't even as much cash as we thought to be able to bail us out. Guys, I'm speaking with R.C. Williams of Sherloc Exposes. We have a minute before the bottom of the break. He's going to stay with me for a little longer because I do want to touch on digital currency. The theme of this program has been the making of an American dictator. We talked about corruption last hour. We talked about some of the cultural issues. We'll bring that back full circle. But what happens if the economy is collapsed? What happens if you nationalize the banks? What happens if the Fed starts talking about a digital currency? Oh, because they have. They have. Guys, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but we have to watch the writing that's on the freaking wall. I'll be back with my guest, R.C. Williams. This is Carl Jackson in for the Officer Tatum.
This is the Officer Tatum Show. Keeping it real.
Hey, welcome back to the Officer Tatum Show. I'm your guest host, Carl Jackson, sitting in for the Officer Tatum. The number to call in, 844-900-7243, 844-900-7243. My guest is on the line, R.C. Williams. He's with SherlocExposes.com. They talk about this. I mean, everything you can imagine. RC, breaks stuff down when it comes to crypto, when it comes to banking. He just makes this stuff digestible and understandable for people like myself. RC, here's one of the things that I'm concerned about. All right, you mentioned Janet Yellen basically admitted that she wouldn't be doing this for smaller banks or banks elsewhere. You got Gavin Newsom, hat tip forgotten man. This from the New York Post. This guy has 3 businesses, 3 wineries that all have accounts in the SVB bank. The SVB also donated $100,000 to a charity that was founded by his wife, actress Jennifer Seibel Newsom. According to the news site, I fear what we're seeing is a coalescing of the elites are going to protect the elites, but the little guys are going to get screwed. And here's some of the commentary that I've heard since we spoke last, RC. Hey, get away from the small banks. Go to the big banks. And I'm like, wow, that would really make nationalizing our bank system really easy if you have corporate fascists working with the national government. This is insane to me, RC. And I don't want to scare the crap out of people, but I want to scare the crap out of people because I don't know that there's a balance because they are straight lying to our faces when it comes to this banking system.
So, Carl, my business partner, Juliana Ormond, who you know well, she's an amazing researcher, and she has a saying. She says, when the government starts picking winners and losers, you're living in an oligarchy at best, totalitarian dictatorship at worst. So let's kind of recap what you just said. The big guys getting help, right? The small guys, hey, take your money out. Let me let everybody know something because, I don't want to scare people either, but I'm always going to tell you the truth. That's one thing you can always count on. So here's the deal. Your local bank, your regional bank, or your credit union is the last economic backstop you have from a totalitarian regime. It's simple logic. The more choices you have and the closer they are to you, the better eye that you can keep on them, right? That's why they're telling you, oh, the small banks aren't safe. Go put your money in the big banks. Notice what happened this week, Carl. The big banks streamlined your ability to open accounts and move money into their banks because they're getting ready to suck up all of that business. It's scary for a couple of reasons, Carl, because you're right about the nationalization. And when we talked earlier this week, I said, listen, in essence, what's happened, when you guarantee all the assets or deposits of a bank, you've basically just nationalized it. And even though Janet Yellen has said that she's not going to do that for other banks, read between the lines of what she said, because think about the question she was asked. If the smaller banks fail, will you support them? No. Notice she didn't say that if the bigger banks were to fail, she wouldn't support them because those banks have borrowed $160 billion from the Fed this week to keep themselves sustained. So think about this for a minute. We've got winners and losers. The government's picking them. What are we living in? Right? And Carl, they're doing something incredibly nefarious. I know you wanted to talk about digital currency, so we can do that because the reason they're doing this is even more nefarious.
Yeah, and actually, I just want you to go there because this is what's happening in China, folks. We're living, as I was saying in the first hour, if you don't think that a dictatorship or an authoritarian government could arise here, you're absolutely wrong. We are in a situation in the United States of America where a lot of people would be looking for a strong man. And if people get scared, especially when it comes to their money, they're going to listen to the government if they trust the government. Do not trust this government. This government is no good. These people, in my opinion, are totalitarians. I would almost do the exact opposite of what they say. I tell you this, this is just basic biblical common sense, all right? Don't spend more money than you have. Get yourselves out of debt. I would say keep some cash on hand at home, whatever you can afford. Look for items you can barter. Actually, Sherloc Exposes shares that as well. I got to give you some props, RC. Shares that as well. This is the stuff. It sounds kooky, but guys, We literally almost watched this freaking banking system collapse. I want to move on to digital currency. We only have 30 seconds before the break, RC. So maybe after the break, if we could just wrap up with the threat of digital currency, because the federal government has already talked about it, and no one is talking about it, but we're going to do it here. I'm speaking with R.C. Williams of SherlocExposes.com. I'm your guest host, Carl Jackson, sitting in for the Officer Tatum. We'll be back in just a few.
This is the Officer Tatum Show. Common sense in an uncommon way. Act like you know.
All right, welcome back to the Officer Tatum Show, guys. I know it's a Friday night. And you were like, can't a brother take it easy? But I'm trying to hook you up, all right? I want you guys to sleep well over the weekend, so that's why we are getting our conservative cardio on, even on a Friday evening. And the good news is the MyPillow has a special offer for Brandon Tatum's listeners. So just when you thought it couldn't get any better, Mike Lindell with MyPillow is launching the MyPillow 2.0. When Mike invented MyPillow, it had everything you could ever want in a pillow. Now, nearly 20 years later, he discovered a new technology that makes it even better. The MyPillow 2.0 has a patented adjusted feel of the original MyPillow, and now with the brand new fabric that is made with the temperature regulating thread. The MyPillow 2.0 is the softest, smoothest, and coolest pillow that you'll ever own. For Brandon's exclusive listeners, the MyPillow 2.0 is buy one, get one free as long as you use the promo code Brandon. MyPillow 2.0 temperature regulating technology is 100% made in the USA, and it comes with a 10-year warranty, a 60-day money-back guarantee. All you have to do is go to MyPillow.com, click on the radio listener square at the top of the page to get your buy one, get one free offer. Enter the promo code Brandon or call 800-976-8379 to get your MyPillow 2.0s now. All right, MyPillow.com. Use the promo code Brandon to get your MyPillow 2.0s now. Jacob's still in Greenville. Don't go anywhere. I want to make sure I get to that call. I just want to wrap up here with RC. RC, a couple of points. I want to get to digital currency, but something that I forgot to mention, which is significant, which regardless of how people might feel about crypto right now, Signature Bank didn't get the same treatment as did SVB. Why do you suspect that is?
So great question, Carl. So Signature and Silvergate, both banks that are more involved in crypto, did not get the same treatment as Silicon Valley Bank. So here's the kicker, right? A lot of people think cryptocurrency is just inherently bad. It's actually inherently simple. A true decentralized cryptocurrency, everyone, would allow you to buy, sell, and transact without the government being in your business. Now, we all know that the government absolutely hates competition. So that leads you to understand why those banks fail and why you're being told crypto is inherently dangerous, because it gives you a level of freedom. So, Carl, let's contrast that for a second with the central bank digital currency. There are a number of us out there. Catherine Austin Fitts is one of the best in the world at describing this. But the central bank digital currency is inherently dangerous for a couple of reasons. So I'm going to do a simple breakdown, and then I'm going to tell you guys how they're laying the foundation to do this right now. So imagine that the government one day is all of a sudden your bank. So let's say with everything that's happened, they say one day, look, the banking system's unstable, the economy's unstable, the government's going to become the bank, you're going to use a central bank digital currency, here's your card, your money's in there, right?
Right.
Then they decide, well, Carl, you need to spend more. And Carl said, I don't spend, I save. So they say, we're going to penalize you 10% of your balance every day until you do what we say, or we're going to tell you to stop spending and penalize you until you do what we say, right? And then they're going to decide, Carl had a steak last night, you know what, no more steak for Carl, so you can't go buy it. That's the future of a central bank digital currency. So this goes back to why killing small banks is bad and you being funneled into 5 or 6 big banks. Because once they get you in the kill box of these 5 or 6 big banks and they shut that door on you, Carl, there is no exit. And once they flip the switch for a central bank digital currency, the world as you know it will completely change, and you will have no control and no exit to get out and do anything else. You will be subservient and, in essence, a serf to the government. Now, we know the government doesn't really run anything well. Here's what's really bad, Carl. People miss this in the melee. The other day, the Federal Reserve and the Treasury announced the FedNow program. That program is going to accelerate the ability to do wire transfers and ACHs so you get your money instantly instead of waiting a couple of days. Here's where it gets bad. The Fed is saying that, look, this guarantees that there's no longer a problem. People are going to see the Feds as smart and say, well, the Fed should just run it anyway. And there is your entryway to the central bank digital currency. They're going to make this taste so good that people are going to go for it. And I'm telling you, Carl, and I'm telling everybody listening, if they get you to that point, it's game over. FedNow, they're going to start certifying banks next month, and they're rolling that thing out in July.
Yeah. Oh, man. R.C. Williams, SherlocExposes.com. What is the name of your newsletter again, R.C., where people can find you?
Yeah, sure. Let me break it down for you, Carl. So SherlocExposes.com, we spell the Sherlock without a K, so that's SherLoc, Exposes.com. You'll find all the news. We do a Monday through Friday newsletter called Rip from the Headlines. You can subscribe for free, but we'd love to have you as a paid subscriber for $100 a year. You get this news every day, plus all of our special features. And, Carl, we just launched a new newsletter called Watchmen on the Wall, where we take the top news of the week and we tie in biblical scripture to help people understand how to talk to people who are trying to find their way to Christ. You can actually find that newsletter when you go to SherlocExposes.com. We'd love to have everybody, and we're happy to answer as many questions as people send.
All right, the guy knows what he's talking about. RC, God bless you, man. Appreciate you coming on here.
Thank you, Carl. Appreciate you, brother.